As a great man Tommy once said, "I've got too much time on my hands, it's ticking away, and I don't know what to do with myself." The question is, what time do we have? Well, if you're talking about the Dragon Ball Z card game, we're talking about time as a warrior's tool. Now, any old player from the original card game would note that this card has existed in most forms of the Dragon Ball Z card game. It was originally printed in Frieza Saga, the second set of the original card game, as well as being reprinted in the Capsule Corp Power Pack. After the original game, the GT version of the game reprinted this card in a different form as Epic Battle of the Saiyans. The only difference being that it removed itself from the game after use. I don't think there's a Dragon Ball Z player in the world that would disagree with the statement that this card is a staple across every single deck. It's really strong. It gives you a free combat. You don't have to worry about any of the attacks that your opponent plays. All the damage is stopped. The only thing your opponent can do to stop it in the current version of the game is a villainous or heroic energy sphere, or some other card that makes you not play events. Is this card too good? I'm not sure the answer to that question. Singly, yes. If you compare it to the other blocks in the game right now, there's no other block that stands up to it. You know, a similar block the only one that I could think of would be Namekian Hybrid Defense, and that still only blocks a single attack. The only reason it even compares to Time as a Warrior's Tool is because it has strong rejuvenation abilities. So you could kind of consider it stopping the damage of multiple attacks if you consider its rejuvenation. Any other block, however, just stops an attack, and that's basically it, you know? A major factor to consider when you compare the time in this game to the time in the old game is that it's one of a kind. There aren't any other stop-alls in the game right now. The old game had several. You know, there was Time, there was Vegeta's physical stance, Nappa's physical resistance, Nappa's energy aura, Frieza's force bubble. There were a lot of cards in the old game that stopped all your attacks, so Time wasn't so unique. Another consideration from the old game is that there existed a hard counter card that nearly every beatdown deck played, being Gohan's Kick. And this card was a staple card for beatdown, not just because it shut down Time as a Warrior's Tool, but also because it locked them in combat. They couldn't end combat. They couldn't do anything to block all attacks. So, you know, Gohan's Kick effectively shut down maybe like 15 to 20 really good, highly played cards that were in a lot of decks. So it was a staple in beatdown. There doesn't exist something like that in the game right now. You know, playing Time in your deck really does give you a free combat. The energy sphere in the old game was also a common. You know, it was easy to get access to 3 copies of Trunks' energy sphere. Whereas in this game, they're ultra rares. You know, they're selling online for anywhere between $100 and $150 a piece. So if you want 2 or 3 of them in your deck, you're looking at, you know, another $300 or $400 that you're going to have to spend. There's a lot of differences between this game and the old game. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is this card, should this card have been remade? Should this card exist in the same form as it did in the old game? And personally, my answer to that question is no. It should have been given the Epic Battle of the Saiyans treatment. It should have removed from the game after use. You know, another major difference between this card game and the old game is that we are set at 60 card decks. The old game had 85 as a maximum. You know, beatdown decks, some beatdown decks did play 85 cards. And, you know, that means less combats overall. You know, even if it's one less combat overall, it makes a single combat more impactful. If the average number of combats that you have in a game is 3 in this game, and it was 4 or 5 in the old game, then a single combat matters more in terms of the outcome of the game. Being able to use Time as a Warrior's Tool gives you a free combat. It makes one of those combats that you're in, you take no damage. So if you only need 3 combats to seal a game, and one of those combats you stop all your opponent's attacks, you're shifting the entire game in your favor in a massive way. Now if you just consider cards like Visiting the Past and Heroic Assistance that can allow you to use Time as a Warrior's Tool multiple times in a single game, now you're talking about 2, 3, or 4 combats in which you can just use time and just sit back while your opponent does no damage to you. Is this fair? Is this fair to do? I'm sure that other players of other card games will say, you know, staples are not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You know, this card can be played in any deck, so it being a staple is okay. Well, we have to look at the gap between the blocks, and I mentioned this earlier. This block stands highly above all other blocks in the game right now. That means that you drawing it, one card in your 60 card deck will massively affect the outcome of the game. That means that you can, you know, it increases the luck factor. You know, if you have a card that's better than any other card in your deck, and you draw that card, then that game you're going to win, whereas other games you might not. If you compare this game to a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! That's notorious for its Limit 1 per deck staple cards, those Limit 1 per deck staple cards fall into a certain category. Let's consider Mirror Force, Regeki, Dark Hole. These are all cards that are designed to sweep your opponent's board free of monsters. But there's 3 of them. There's 3 Limit 1 per deck cards that exist that do this function. How many Limit 1 per deck cards do we have in Dragon Ball Z that stop attacks? 1. This single card. Right now, we're at a point with this card game that the decks that are going to be able to consistently use Time as a Warrior's Tool are holding themselves above other decks. I don't want to see a recursion of Time as a Warrior's Tool be a thing. I don't want to see decks, you know, like focus on the use of this one card over and over and over again. That's not a fun way to play. It's not fun for your opponent in the sense that he's just sitting there doing nothing, and it's not fun for you because the only thing you're doing is blocking all attacks. I felt like the inclusion of this card from the old game was healthy for the game. We needed a really sweepingly powerful combat event to be able to say, this is what combat events are going to do. They're going to be extremely powerful effects that you want to include in your deck. And Time as a Warrior's Tool is the creme de la creme. It is the epitome. You want it in every deck. There's no question about that. But being able to recur it multiple times in a game where you're only going to have 3 combats, if you use time twice, you won the game. And that's the problem. And, you know, a card like Visiting the Past might not be too good. It might not be. However, if you include it with the idea that time is not removing itself from the game and you can use time multiple times in a game with Visiting the Past, then it may be too good. There are very little counters to time in the current game right now. And I don't like it. I don't want you to make Gohan's kick. That's the thing. I'm not saying make Gohan's kick, because Gohan's kick is just as boring as Wall Breaker is. You know, you put it in your deck just to counter someone else, hard counter on other things, you know, and you only have one stop all. There's no reason for Gohan's kick. Take the stop all you have and bring it closer to the other blocks that are in the game right now. Bridge the gap. There's a huge gap between blocks, and time is on the top, and the next one is probably hybrid defense, but it's way down here. There's just this huge area in between here that, you know, that there's nothing. There's nothing in there. So make it removed from the game after use. Bring it down, single time use, you know, make control decks actually have to control the game in interesting ways rather than just recurring Time as a Warrior's Tool over and over again. So I hope you've enjoyed my first vlog video where I'm just going to sit down. I'm just going to pick a topic, sit down and talk about it.